we have Commanders at the Bengals. The Bengals are coming in favored by 7.5 in this one with a 47-point over-under. I think, it might be more so on the Bengals side. But, we'll see. This should be a very interesting game, a get-right game for guys like Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. Chase is already talking about he has some kind of dance prepared. That's not the gritty if he scores this week. So might be putting the cart in front of the horse just a smidge here. Let's just have a good game here first. But it is Washington, man. So if anyone could do it against Washington, it's going to be these two, hopefully getting their rhythm back and just hopefully set their season off for us Burrow Chase owners out there. But we're starting Chase. We're starting Burrow. I have B-Rob as a must start for me. I'm just real in on him this year. We talked about T. Higgins dealing with that hamstring injury. So let's start there. If T. Higgins plays coming off this hammy, are you finding a way to get him in this lineup with against this Washington defense?
I understand the appeal. I understand the name value, and I understand who you're playing against. The reality is it's a hamstring injury. I think they're going to ease him back in. They're probably going to treat it like a preseason game. I haven't heard anyone come out and say that it's going to be a pitch count. But for those that don't know, I was a two-sport college athlete, and I went on to coach after I finished my playing career. So from an injury, and that's not a brag. That's to set up my point here, which is...
Oh, I would brag about that. That's worth bragging about. I'll brag for you. Hey, my guy right here. Like, this is who we're bringing to get right for you guys. Like, here we go.
from a health perspective, the hamstring is, I mean, you guys know, having watched and, seen football all your lives, it just is such a nagging injury. So I can see them, especially in this game, if it gets away from the Commanders, and I do expect the Bengals to run away with this a little bit. I just don't think you're going to get the return on investment that you're going to get next week, the week after, and future weeks with T. Higgins. So I'm not going to start him this week, even if the news is still positive. And it's a Monday night game. I'd rather have someone on. Give me JSN. You know what I mean? Give me a guy that I know is going to play that has a chance at a blow up week and a touchdown.
Yeah, I have him down as like my wide receiver 43 right now. Like I'd play him ahead of Keon Coleman, right? Like I'd take my chances with him in Washington and just hope maybe he gets in the end zone, over someone like Coleman. But it's real close at that point, like you said. Just of all the people, Higgins is notorious for coming in thinking he's ready to go and then just not. I'm just done, and then just doesn't finish the game. So he's notorious for that. He did that to fantasy owners so many times. So you have to still be a little wary of that. But yeah, I mean, you'd like to just see him have that get right game, have him look good, and then just feel comfortable starting him, moving forward. And I have quite a bit of shares, of Higgins this year. Like you said, you and I have been pretty high on him as well too. I think that upside's there, obviously, in that franchise tag, season. So he is going to be playing for a contract. So he wants to put good film out there. So, at the same time, I think if he does go, he's at least healthy enough. But again, like you said, it's his preseason. He hasn't been able to play, hasn't been able to do anything. So, I definitely expect some sort of pitch count there. But that's not always bad. They're usually good of, maybe they just won't have him in on, running plays and, but I'm sure he'll be in there if they're in the red zone and stuff like that.
I mean, I know this is a fantasy show, but at some point we have to talk about real football for just 10 seconds. The Bengals have to win this game or their season's over.
Yeah.
Like their season is done. So I think it's actually, the reason I bring that up is I actually think it's more of a reason not to play Higgins.
Oh.
I think they lean super heavy on Jamar Chase. I think Mike Gesicki, you asked me earlier about sneaky starts. I know he's a sit, but in DFS, I think you could go there if you play the full slate. I know most people only play the main slate. This is a Monday night game. But I think this is potentially the Bengals season. And if they lose it, it might be Zach Taylor's job.
Could be
not this week.
Right. Yeah. Not on the chop block,
but I think this could be one of those like tick marks if they lose it as to why he gets fired at the end of the year. You cannot start 0-3, not with this roster,
and especially not against the Commanders.
The Commanders at home, where they've already lost to the Patriots at home.
Right. You can't do that again. That's hot seat status there. Yeah. So for sure. So what are we thinking about other guys here? Iosivas. Are we getting him in your lineup this week? Jermaine Burton, like anybody like that. Seems like we might have a Bengals fan in here. Iosivas, the guy. Two red zone targets last week, 2 touchdowns, 2 tutties.
It's the consistency piece for me. So I think it's great DFS plays. I think if you want to take some prop bets on the the over unders, the higher lowers, then go for it. But In managed leagues, nope. The only players I want on the Bengals are Jamar. I want the stars. I want Chase. I want Burrow. I don't want Zach Moss. The inefficiency for me has just been brutal. And it's not just the inefficiency. It's the lack of touches. 9 at rushing attempts in week 1, 12 in week 2. I can't
They're 0-2. You can't run the ball if you're playing from behind,
And so to me, it's like, I get it. They should be up in this game. So that maybe makes the case. But then again, it's like, is it going to be all Moss? Is it going to be Moss and Brown? I don't want Zach Moss in my lineup this week if I can avoid it. I have him down. Give me a second to switch off the QB rankings here. I have him. I'm still scrolling. So
that was our oh man, that just reminded me, so like year 1, man, when we were doing our start sit shows, and when we did exactly what you just said right there, we just made that sound effect of zzz, which is that scrolly ball, that just tells you where we had him ranked if we made that noise. So way to bring that back. Shout out to Dustin, man. That was him that that did that. We were cracking up when we first did that. It happened live. It was good stuff. So that made me.
I have an RB 26, but I have him in there. Excuse me, RB 27. I just moved Najee up, but I have him with names that you don't. Zamir White, DeAndre Swift, Austin Ekeler, Chuba, Elliott. You don't want to play those guys, so he's in that tier of guys this week that I don't want to play.
Yeah, I have him at 23, but again, it's because it's Washington. I probably normally would have had like Ford ahead of him. Maybe Najee. Just I'm not a big Pittsburgh guy either way. No. But yeah, so there's Singletary, Chuba, like Zeke. I couldn't really get anyone ahead of Moss. At that point, again, going up against Washington, if they do get close, if Chase is down at the 1, like it's probably Moss, getting in the end zone there.
Sure.
Or maybe if they finally just blow him out, maybe he gets some good run late in the game and see those touches increase. That we expect around that 15 carry mark. So good stuff there. Let's go over the other side of the ball. Talked a lot of Bengals. Let's talk some Commanders. Jayden Daniels, where do you have him?
He's got to throw a touchdown at some point, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't he? Like
his rushing floor though, man, he's been. He finished QB5 like without throwing a touchdown. So like
so that's the key for me. So I have him ranked right now at QB 14.
I have him at 8. Yeah. Hey, Bengals defense doesn't look good, and they got a lot of injuries, man.
So that's what I was going to say is I have him at 14, but the rushing upside is the reason why I could easily see myself moving him up. The challenge for me is he hasn't thrown a touchdown. The passing volume's not really been there, and if the Bengals take away the rushing, you're getting a absolute floor game. So I can see it. I get it. I love Jayden Daniels. I have him in all over Dynasty, right? I have him in one of my redraft leagues as my QB2. I'm sitting him, but I think the caveat is he's got to run, and if they're losing, I think he's gonna run. So he can get there, but I think the game script needs to go the way that we expect it to for him to get there, and if it doesn't. It's going to be another stinky week. You're going to be disappointed.
Going to be tough. Now, if Washington is playing from behind, Ekeler's look pretty decent. I mean, he's looking a little more explosive. Kind of has that third down role. It still hasn't deterred me from Robinson because I think they can definitely coexist there as the better talents just on the team in general behind Scary Terry, who we'll talk about here next. Yeah. But how do you feel about Ekeler? Is he a sneaky little play here?
I think he's an interesting flex play. I wouldn't start him in one of my 2 running back spots, but you mentioned it, right? If the game's behind, he is the better of the 2 pass catchers. He hasn't been super involved. I thought he'd be a little bit more. And I think he had the big catch last week that maybe was negated by penalty or he dropped something. I was at the bar. I had 12 screens going with all the games so, and no sound. They've got the country music blasting. So kind of having to tell the Raiders fans to shut up so I can watch the games.
You tell them.
I did. Yeah. Well, I might get a beer thrown at my head or worse.
Yeah.
But Ekeler is an interesting flex play this week. And then as I think about, passing volume and a negative game script, I do think that makes Terry interesting this week. He's still seeing targets. He got 8 targets again last week. They played the Giants, not a great team, but you're right. The Bengals haven't looked good. Their defense hasn't been super solid. I don't know that the Bengals will. It's 7.5. I don't think they cover. I think they win this game. They should win it easily. But I do think there is some potential garbage time goodness in there for Scary Terry.
Very nice. Yeah, and that'll lead us right into Terry. So you think they finally open up the offense and let Jayden Daniels do what he kind of did best, is throw that deep ball? Like, we haven't quite seen that yet. And it's screaming for Terry, and this could be potentially the matchup with it. I mean, you got Cam Taylor-Britt back. I mean, they got an okay, decent secondary. But, can you find a way to get Scary Terry in your lineups, or has he never left?
I mean, I don't think he's left. You drafted him to be probably your wide receiver 2, maybe your wide receiver 3 if you went wide receiver heavy. So I think you're good there. Cam Taylor-Britt's probably only making one-handed interception in his career, so I don't think that's happening. I'll tell you what, man.
It was a nice catch, though.
Watching that game live last weekend, I was like, "Holy shit, that may be one of the best catches I've ever seen."
Yeah,
and he's not even an offensive guy, so it was unreal, the one-handed pick. But again, I think you can get Terry in there, and I think at some point you got to let Cliff cook up some stuff for these guys. Otherwise, you're just keeping the defense, keeping everything in front of them, and you're not winning games. So,
man, his 1.1 a dot, offense is just brutal, man. Brutal. Let's get some air under the ball here. So I have Scary Terry as my wide receiver 33. So I have him as a wide receiver 3 or flex, in your 2 wide receiver leagues. Just going back to Ekeler, man. I mean, double-digit points in 2 games. Playing barely 50% of the snaps. But just having that, passing upside 3 for 47 on the receiving end, 8 carries for 38 is pretty decent as well, as at 4.75 a carry. Yeah. He averaged, only 2 carries, but for 10 yards last week, that was 5 yards per carry. So maybe that explosiveness is still there a bit, and if they can keep him healthy.
McLaurin? Where'd you have Terry?
33.
I have him at 33, right above
That's
that.
Hilarious.
Right above that Jacksonville Buffalo stack that I read.
Oh, okay.
Don't play these guys. I was like, Terry can be better than these plays. So I have him right there in that,
literally. So I have Diggs at 34, Shakir 35, Kirk at 36, and I moved Watson up to 37. I can't play Deontay Johnson over Christian Watson just with his upside. So I made that move actually during the show. So my other rank might not match up back to that when I mentioned it earlier. So anyway, all right. So who else we got in this game? I mean, I'm sitting Ertz, I'm sitting De'Ami Brown, McCaffrey, Chase Brown, who was mentioned in the chat here, saying he's due. He is, but he's on my bench right now. Well, he'll be due on my bench, and then see what happens here. If Moss doesn't, get his, what together, maybe we will see the Chase Brown show here. So I'm still holding on to him. Yeah. I'm still sitting Iosivas, Burton, and Gesicki is a little banged up, so keep your eye on that as well too. If he is, and so maybe Erick All might be one of those interesting, plays as well too, with no Gesicki. So keep an eye out for that as well, because I think he had like 4 or 5 targets last game as well too. We mentioned him on our waiver wire show on Monday.
Tony Romo just get Erick All, man. I felt like they needed to go have a bromance hug afterwards.
He was getting mushy on him, huh?
Oh, he was getting real Tony Romo. So
okay.
Tony Romo.
Tony. All right.
Tell you what, Jim, this player, Erick All, man, Jim, you're going to watch Erick All. Okay, Tony, we get it.
All right, Erick All, man, we get it. No, that's good stuff, man.